Hello, welcome to the Strategic Intelligence podcast. At Global Data Strategic Intelligence, we track over 100 tech, industry, ESG, and macro themes impacting all major sectors. I'm Thomas Pothalingam, and today I'm joined by Martina Raveni, analyst in the Strategic Intelligence team, to discuss how climate change is disrupting global supply chains. Hi, Martina. How are you?
Good, thanks, Tom. How are you?
Right, very well, thank you. Climate change is a major factor that is forcing all aspects of society to adapt to its impact, and that extends to the supply chains of all industries. Its effect put the onus on companies to shift and climate-proof their operations. In this context and the aftermath of the impacts of recent extreme weather events, mitigation and adaptation must be priorities for companies going forward.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Indeed, climate change brings environmental and economic consequences. And yeah, we are witnessing many extreme weather events, as you just said, especially in the last years. And we've been really seeing as well how their impact is not only, I can say, directly to the area that it's affecting, but all the consequences go down all the supply chain of pretty much every industry in every sector. So supply chains are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And for this reason, you rightly said mitigation and adaptation must be priorities for companies.
Absolutely. I mean, climate change is increasingly impacting supply chains across various industries, primarily through extreme weather events, shifting precipitation patterns, and the resulting economic pressures. The World Bank estimates that 140 million people will be affected by extreme droughts, floods, and storms by 2050. And in addition, researchers also found that climate change has boosted heat-related deaths in the warm seasons by an average of 37%. By 2050, the rise in sea levels could affect much of the East Coast, while islands such as the Bahamas and low-lying cities like Jakarta or Mumbai could be catastrophically submerged. The impacts of these range from direct operational disruptions to shifts in market demand for new technologies that can withstand or adapt to these changes. Physical disruptions can particularly enhance electrical and communication infrastructure disruptions. I mean, due to extreme weather, widespread outages undermine companies and complicate operations further, especially during drought periods, as these can affect cooling capabilities for data centers and power plants, for example. In addition, precipitation events like storms or floods and droughts can also lead to lost revenue from production downtime and increased costs from the need to find new suppliers who also might charge higher rates.
Yeah, no, that's really difficult, and that's a good point. And I'd like to bring some numbers to back it up what you just said. Indeed, the World Economic Forum reports that the number of reported deaths from the decade to 2010 to 2019 was one third of those recorded in the decade 1980 and 1989. So this is obviously great, but on the flip side, over the same time period, the reported economic losses increased by almost 500%. From this start, we can say that while it is true, because it's true that warnings and disaster management have improved over time, the economic cost of extreme weather has grown substantially.
So, following on from that, these impacts are industry agnostic and affect some of the most notable and significant sectors globally, and that includes the tech sector. Can you go into a little bit more detail about which technologies might be affected?
Yeah, sure. So we said every industry is affected, and that includes, of course, the tech sector. And a lot of technologies or whatever is involved in the technological supply chain is affected. But I could give some example maybe on AI, given the attention that he has at the moment.
Absolutely, please.
So before you mentioned data centers are vital for the AI industry, but at the same time, they are particularly vulnerable to climate change because they often located near power stations and rely on extensive networks of electricity cables. And this means that heavy rain and flooding can damage infrastructure and disrupt operation. For example, This June 2024, thunderstorms led to flooding of the data center of Skyguide, which is a Swiss air navigation service, creating disruptions in the Geneva airspace. Or I don't know if you remember, 2 years ago in summer 2022, in UK we had an extreme heat wave, and one of Google's London data centers overheated due to a cooling-related outage. And these are just two examples, but there are many more. For example, the wildfire in California that threatened the center facilities as well as hurricanes. So another example that comes to my mind is Taiwan, which we know that it's really, really important for the semiconductor value chain because it produces semiconductors and the AI chips, which are vital for AI development. But maybe you may not know that chip production is extremely water intensive. Semiconductor factories use water for cooling systems and cleaning silicon wafers. And Taiwan reservoirs rely heavily on summer typhoons to refill, but the problem is that climate change is bringing longer and more frequent droughts to the island, thus threatening, of course, the Taiwanese water supply. Indeed, interestingly, in 2021, Taiwan experienced its worst drought since 1964, affecting chip production, of course, because there was a temporary reduction of water supply to factories. And the chip giant TSMC had even to truck in water and drill new wells to keep factories running. So we can see how the drought of Taiwan really impacting the supply chain regarding the semiconductors and chip production. And yeah, in general, overall, from this example, we can see how the climate change effects on the tech sector are really tangible.
Well, I had no idea. And then those could pose a serious threat to the broad improvement of those industries, which are especially dependent on research and development.
Indeed, I agree. And in a way, this may jeopardize the progress of several technologies. And building on this, I wanted to ask you, how do you think these companies can mitigate the impact I've been talking through?
So, from the beginning, to mitigate the impacts of climate change, companies need to recognize and address their climate-related risk exposure. All companies who comply or engage with the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures have to disclose climate-related risks and opportunities throughout their existing reporting processes. These provide frameworks for disclosing the actual and potential impacts of climate-related risks on the organization's business, strategy, and financial planning. And big tech has already started to produce TCFD reports. For example, Microsoft's TCFD 2024 report quantified the projected climate change impacts on its data centers, taking into account their exposure to both acute and chronic physical climate-related hazards. In terms of actually mitigating the impacts of climate change, companies have several mitigation strategies on offer. So supplier engagement through transparency and communication allows suppliers to better understand and manage climate risks effectively and in a more agile way. But also you can maintain backup suppliers and critical stock. Companies can ensure their continuity in their operations even when faced with direct disruptions. Companies can also adapt their particular product offerings to meet emerging needs driven by climate change, such as increased demand for technologies that can withstand extreme weather. Fundamentally, many companies are integrating sustainability criteria into their procurement processes, which is encouraging suppliers to adopt low carbon practices. Thank you very much, Martina, for your insights.
Thank you, Tom.
And thanks for listening. And from us in Strategic Intelligence, see you next time.